This group is the Conscious Communication Group. And I started thinking about how the word conscious applies to communication as opposed to effective. That there really is a difference in the two terms and the benefits of the two. And so I was hoping people today could share what they think the difference is between simply communication that's simply effective and communication that's conscious, and what those benefits might be. Does anybody want to start?
I liked that question. A few things started coming to mind. I would love to speak.
Great.
Yeah, I feel like conscious communication, it has a number of different qualities than effective communication, because effectiveness could be effective due to a positionality of even, let's say, personal desire, personal ambition is what I mean to say. So that we could use an example, let's say, of the media. The media could have a communication that they might consider effective that might not have necessarily even truth within it, or altruistic motive behind it. So that being said, it can be effective in getting done what it wants to get done for whatever its scope of vision is, where conscious communication holds something much larger. It has the capacity, true consciousness, to hold all of it. And so it seems, if we were talking about which one might be more effective, I feel like conscious communication, it invites a larger macroscopic vision, or a holding of the whole, than effective communication. I feel like effective communication is excellent when done with consciousness. That being said, there may be a limit to effective communication because of its relationship, its potential to be in relationship to ambition, where consciousness isn't ambition driven for any personal gain of any kind. It's seeking the balance of all of life and the whole. That's kind of what's coming to me.
Amen, brother. Okay, so yeah, just to reflect back what I was thinking is, first, that effective communication is outcome oriented, and that said, conscious communication can be outcome oriented. The difference then, are you saying the difference is that perhaps the outcome that you're hoping for in conscious communication, perhaps you don't have a specific outcome in mind, simply hoping to create the best possible solution, whereas effective communication has a specific outcome in mind from the beginning?
Yes. And I feel like it's like, I love this metaphor of the bigger bowls that holds the smaller bowls. I feel like consciousness is a larger bowl than effective is. And so effective communication is a smaller bowl that can absolutely fit within conscious communication. That said, conscious communication can fit effectiveness. It can also fit lovingness. It can also fit the balance of the whole within it. And it also, I feel, has the capacity to live in faith, where effectiveness might have a drive and can see the parts it can see and can't see beyond what it can see. Where consciousness has the faith to be able to communicate that which is being inspired in a minute, not even necessarily understanding why that inspiration is being inspired. Still, the capacity to communicate it is there because it's coming from consciousness. And so it lives transcendent of a motive that would be considered effective to get from point A to point B. And that's really valuable, obviously, within the vision and mission of the WSS. That said, conscious communication also, within WSS, we get to learn and talk about faith and, transcendent of trust, and that consciousness has, I feel like, the capacity to resonate with spirit first and foremost, where effective communication, it could be effective at the level of the sacral chakra, from the sacral chakra to the sacral chakra, or from the heart chakra to another heart chakra, or even a root chakra consider something effective if it's going to get what it wants. And that might not be conscious communication, which it has the capacity to grow and evolve and change into an absolute faithful communication in alignment with spirit that can speak from multiple different centers simultaneously and change and shift and navigate to where it's communicating to, because of the faith of surrender. That consciousness has the potential to navigate that other things can't. What does it mean to resonate with spirit?
I thought that what you shared brought up that important distinction point, because yeah.
Well, I guess my question would be, what does it look like when something doesn't? Sometimes I tend to be, I like more concrete examples. So when something doesn't resonate with spirit, what does that look like?
Personal ambition, looking for personal gain over the balance and the good of the whole. Pleasure at the expense of others. Any example of narcissism or fear doesn't resonate with spirit. Faith doesn't, control doesn't resonate with spirit. Spirit is respectful of all things and able to love, like John says often, like, we'll love you no matter what you choose. That's how spirit would operate. And so I feel like the embodied capacity to love everything, no matter how it may be choosing in a moment, and even if it's choosing something that could be less than constructive, spirit would be immediately forgiving. So resonating with spirit would be instantly forgiving, and even the humility of not knowing where the conversation is going to go 2 sentences from now, and trusting a deeper knowing in the heart or the light that what is necessary to be said will be said. And it's that could be oversimplistic in a way. And I hear you, what you're sharing on liking things that are more concrete, and I feel like there's a lot of value to speaking to very specific things, especially in certain cases. So I think, just like everything, it's a case-by-case example. And I do feel that conscious communication does have the capacity to hold all of it. And there is probably also prerequisite purification necessary that would support one in a greater alignment for that. And I think that all the steps all the way there, all of our conversations and our personal processes and challenges are also vital on the way to what I would look at as a surrender to consciousness, to be able to meet the moment from that way. Because say something outside seemingly is looking to control me, it's only my own control strategy that would be an aversion to it. Where if I was genuinely just resonating with spirit and holding the light, we would be able to spontaneously know the suffering of another and hold enough compassion to not be triggered into its reactive state that would like us to be triggered into its reactive state. And if we could see that, we would have the capacity of consciousness that may allow, with the invocation and intention, for spirit to communicate, and for probably other parts of the personality, the higher mental body, coming into alignment to also have its learning process with that. Thanks.
Thank you so much for saying all that. Thank you.
Very complete. Tracy, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I do. What was coming to mind when you asked the question was the image, and when Travis was speaking, was the image of someone holding on to the banks of a river when like from my education and how to live life in a spiritual way, you're supposed to just go with the flow of life. Like the river takes you, and swimming upstream kind of is too tiring, and holding onto a rock is like fear-based. It's like you don't want to move forward, you're scared. Maybe it just feels more safe and comfortable, but it produces tension, and it produces this like holding that isn't maybe not healthy for the body. So this is my way of describing like a concrete physical way that one could be aligned with spirit and one's not. And then what Travis was saying was like, if you were someone on the banks of the river watching someone hold on for dear life to the rock, and you had all this knowledge, well, like how would you perceive that? There's many different ways to perceive it. If you were triggered by, if you were coming from a spiritual ego place, you might be triggered by it and be like, you're not supposed to be doing that. You know, if you just let go, like you would kind of talk down to them and you'd be like, why are you doing that? But if you were coming from like a loving conscious place, you might go up to them and like be playful with them and try to like provoke them to let go just by being like engaging with them in a kind, playful way. So it's like, yeah, I really liked what you said about the trigger coming up. Like if you're resisting spirit or consciousness coming from someone else or from just the flow of life, then you're just not living in a state where you're receptive to truth or the reality that life can be fun and beautiful and harmonious.
Mhm.
Okay, so
And just like a real life personal example, like I know I live basically with my parents right now. I don't see them all the time. And there's so many potentials for triggers to come up or me to feel the fear emanating from them that has nothing to do with me, just their conditioning and because I know them so well and their energy. It's like I could resist that and be like, oh gosh, you guys are so this or that. Or I could be like, just really be present with that and be like, that's where they're at. And that's beautiful. And I have compassion and love for whatever they're experiencing or emanating into the field. And I literally transform that by accepting it. So it's like transforming. I don't know where I'm going with this. What are we talking about? But it's like this process of alchemy or transformation where you're actually, it says acceptance, accepting and receptive of what is there, and just kind of observing and noticing and being like with no reaction. So
yeah, I think it's really interesting that Travis outlined the kinds of things that aren't present in conscious communication. And Tracy, I think you just gave us a picture of what kinds of things are present. So it's neat that we're covering all of that, so if it's conscious, then it'll be receptive, it'll be accepting. What else would you say about it?
Trusting, like, I don't know if that's
Caring.
It'll be caring. Okay. I'm making a list so when we do our team of teams report out, I can actually have something to share for our team.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thomas, I'm wondering, what do you perceive the difference between simply effective communication and conscious communication to be? And why is it important? Why is it important? And if so, why?
Well, actually, I'm not exactly sure what conscious communication is. Maybe one can add non-violent communication is part of conscious communication. So meaning not hurting anybody else, and not using aggressive language that might be hurtful or divisive. But otherwise, I'm not so sure what exactly it is.
I'm adding violence and aggressive language to the list of things not present
Yeah,
thank
but there's
you
an
for that.
entire theory or research field about nonviolent communication, NVC. That's a technical term.
I
You heard
think
about it?
I think what Travis was saying about personal agenda is important because, like,
Agenda, that's a good one,
or
Tracy.
you were saying if it was like a personal, I don't remember exactly, but you kept saying that and it kept popping out to me. It's like if you have an agenda with your listening, where if you're just listening because you to find a thing that you want to say as maybe like you're an agenda to be seen, or I don't know, and then other things like, yeah, if you're just using communication to get your own way, or then maybe that's not conscious, but I don't know why exactly it wouldn't. I don't know. I guess is that hurtful because the other person's not valued as a thought, like, I don't know.
I see what you're as like basically the agenda being a form of manipulation, and which would be harmful because it's not necessarily respecting or empowering one's free will choice by, like you said, playing with them instead and getting them to choose from their own trust and love and fear, or trust and love and faith models, to let go of the rock. Even if there's like a so-called good intention to get somebody to do something that the ego thinks is the best thing they can do, the spiritual ego, if we manipulate them into doing that, it's not the same as empowering and encouraging from an empowered conscious place, which would be more likely to meet them where they are, where the agenda might not be able to meet somebody effectively where they are. It might meet somebody where they are and totally miss where someone is, and then they might not join the WSS, for example.
I think I'd like to try to address Thomas's question. You know, that you're not quite clear on what we're getting at with conscious versus effective. And I think, for example, you could meet with someone. You could say, all right, we're here to work together on this project. And you know what? I know how to get it done. And I have this plan and I'm going to explain it to you. And as long as you understand my plan, then we can move forward. And perhaps the plan gets executed beautifully. And you say, well, see, that was effective. I communicated what I wanted and we got it done. And I think the difference with conscious communication is that it involves waiting to see what the other person in the room has to offer. And there may have been an even better solution that someone hadn't considered, that was available, that simply got overlooked because we were busy focused on this. And if I can digress and give you a metaphor, there was a book, the original book, Jurassic Park, by Michael Crichton. And the big thing that happened in the book is they had computers that were there to check they had cameras and they would count the number of dinosaurs in the pen, you know, to make sure that everyone was there and in their pen. And they didn't know that a certain dinosaur was breeding because they hadn't told the computer to look for any extras. They had only told the computer to look and make sure, are there 10 dinosaurs here? Good, check. And the computer wasn't telling anybody that there's 25 dinosaurs here. And I think that's the difference we're talking about with conscious versus effective, is that you could get everything done and fulfill your whole agenda effectively, but without consciousness, you may not be open to something better. There could have been something greater accomplished, or you could be forcing your agenda at the expense of someone else and not be aware of it.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
I liked it.
Thomas,
Maybe-
do you have any thoughts about that?
No, it's for me quite late, so it's very hard to come up instantaneously with such ideas where I'm not an expert. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's such a late time for me.
Oh, I can appreciate that. I'm glad you're here. We always like your input.
yeah.
Mm.
It makes me think about a Tony Robbins, something I read in a Tony Robbins book that where he says you need to be open and flexible. You make a plan, but then you need to be open and flexible to that plan changing if it doesn't go according to what you thought it would be. And that really spoke to me, because if you make a plan, you can be so focused, like you were saying, Julie, on one part of one aspect of life, and then you're not leaving room for, literally, consciousness is like the ebb and flow of life. It's like the ability for things to randomly change on a whim, because like it's almost like the concept of magic. Like you're not leaving space for magic to happen and to actually be assisted with maybe your project if you're so focused on one way of doing it or one direction, or so that really helped me to learn, okay, like check in every different steps along the way to see, is this working? Is this not working? What do I need to change in order for it to work? What assistance might I need? Or does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like like effectiveness meets consciousness, because you need to provide space for the consciousness to fuel the effectiveness almost. And yeah.
Like that. It's like an ongoing conversation. New
Yeah.
pieces are being added all the time. Take them into account.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a stagnant conversation. It's ongoing. So
That seems.
yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say that seems really vital too, with for the WSS and its ongoing intentions with really serving the world and climate change, because there's going to be how many new pieces of new challenges that could be arising to take into account, and so even AI, like the example that you gave, Julie, if it's just recognizing these 10 units and not recognizing these 25, and if climate change has produced all of a sudden 10 new things that we didn't even know because of everything together, it's like, oh my goodness gracious, it just seems like, I'm just thinking of a metaphor of it being, that's a higher form of consciousness, to constantly take into account what is new. And just coming back to those wonderful words that you offered, Tracy, that you wrote down, Julie, receptivity and acceptance. And that seems to be like really vital for that process occurring effectively, is that we're also accepting, receptive to everything new that continues to come in as we learn new, potentially challenging parts. I don't know if I'm going somewhere. That was just.
No, I'm writing this down. I'm writing all kinds of things, like what Tracy was talking about is conscious communication. It allows for surprise. It allows for growth. It allows for change. These are, it allows for new ideas, right? And then I'm writing down our list of what conscious communication lacks and what it contains. So, and that's our stuff from up there. So it lacks narcissism, fear, hatred, insecurity, control strategies, shame, judgment, violence, aggressive language, agenda, personal agenda. Did I miss anything?
I would say there's one thing that was already said, but it's a nuance of it, and it adds, the nuance feels important because it adds a deeper level of accountability, and that is passive aggressiveness. Because one could say, well, I'm not being aggressive, but one could be passively aggressive, and may potentially that could be a blind spot of not recognizing where we are aggressive and controlling within the passive aggressiveness. So I feel like it's important.
Okay.
I have
Good.
more to say.
What's that?
This topic is so interesting. I want to also share, point out another nuance, kind of like Travis was talking about. Like when we talk about effectiveness, it's unlike being passive aggressive versus being not aggressive, but like what's in the middle, I would think is like assertiveness or directness. And sometimes when I personally act in a direct or assertive way, I actually feel shame about it because I don't know if I'm being too like controlling. Like you brought up the word control, Travis. So it's like, how do you navigate? How do you healthily, effectively in the moment, like give that assertive directive and feel good about it? You know, because I feel like the healthy masculine has been so suppressed that we don't know what it feels or looks like sometimes.
I'm learning you're doing great with it. You know, for example, in our meeting today, when you couldn't hear what someone was saying because she seemed to be speaking really softly, I couldn't hear either. And I was really glad. It's like I didn't want to badger. And so you spoke once and it didn't get any better. And I thought, good for you. I mean, you weren't unkind about it. You said, I really want to hear what you have to say. And I can't hear you, you know? And it was important. It was important to say that. I didn't think there was anything controlling about it, or I thought it was important to express that.
Yeah. And I just find it interesting that one like me or maybe some other people would have such a fear of like, oh, was that too much? Was that okay? It's like, no, you're just telling it like it is. It's not unloving. Like maybe your tone isn't like, oh, sweet and kind, but it's like just like direct. It's like, why I just would love to know and have more examples in reality about what is like effective communication that's direct, but it's also conscious. Like it doesn't have all those agendas and all those things. It's just really clear, you know? So
I do feel like that is like like a moment to moment or like a situation to situation discernment, because you know, sometimes it probably need not matter to just be really direct about something and let somebody know, you know, and sometimes super directness could be way too much. For example, like even if you were to tell like somebody who's perhaps newer on the spiritual path in a way that we're looking to dissolve the personality and dissolve who we think we are completely into spirit. Somebody might be like, you know, I might not be interested, and it might have taken them 2 years to get there, and they could have been all about learning to surrender these parts. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess what I'm getting to is I just reflect on what John has shared so many times about really listening, which coming back to, you know, just like care, like if there's enough deep care there that's being practiced consistently enough, I feel like we're going to gain through that practice the discernment on like how direct we can or should not be. Because like I've heard John say many times, like he's not going to perhaps like he will guide us forward in certain ways, like at our own pace, not at a pace that we're not necessarily choosing. And so I think like if we're willing to hear some sort of an intuition in our heart and knowing like, oh, even though I would really like to say this and point this out in this way right now, it could be potentially ineffective to do that. And I don't know, it just does seem to me like a very moment to moment kind of, or sometimes even being direct might be vital and it might hurt a person's feelings. Doesn't mean that it's not overall actually serving more. So this is like such a nuanced, intuitive thing to learn and such an approach. And that's why I love this conversation today about conscious communication, because looking at consciousness as this absolute bowl, this really big bowl that could hold all the other bowls, all of the nuances, and has the capacity to discern with what and where and how to take effective action, but and from consciousness. And so it's like I don't think that there's any black or white answer to any question. I think each answer is going to be nuanced to where and when and to what circumstance it's going to be asked to.
Right.
Only conscious can get that.
I think that a conscious communication, okay, it's discerning. That's a good word we can say. It's discerning. When you talk about the directness, I think all conscious communication can be direct. I don't see anything unconscious about directness. The discernment comes from what is it you want to be direct about? You know, I mean, but I don't think there's anything inherently unconscious simply in being direct. Are you stating you can be direct and gentle, you can be direct and discerning. You don't have to tiptoe around a point. It just depends on what your point is. You know, is this the time to make that point or not?
Yeah, I think that going back to receptivity is one of the foundational keys to the conscious communication, because you have to be receptive to your environment and to the undercurrent of emotions of people and know who you're speaking to, and you only have that if you've spent some time being receptive. Like, where is this person at? All of the things, like, you have to assess the situation, and that involves being receptive. So that it's profound. I mean, it's a really good way to anchor what we're doing at the WSS, and the whole divine feminine awakening is like, it's mostly receptivity.
Good call. Deep, thanks.
So yeah.
Well, it's getting late for me here, and I'm thinking this is a good place to break, and then we can, if anybody has any thoughts about next week, we can put them in the WhatsApp or in the Chloe message, and we'll see what we can come up with to build on this for next week. Or you guys can keep going, but I have to get off. It's late here, and I gotta take care of my beans.
Yeah, you do. Those beans.
So
thank you for your questions, all of them today, Julie. I really loved the conversation that it opened. I thought that this was a really excellent meeting.
yeah, thanks. Me too.
If we might offer brief reflection. First, everything that you said is brilliant and necessary and helpful and appreciated. And thank you for putting that information out on YouTube, etc. We might suggest that in prior definitions of effective communication, they are inherently unconscious or tribal or egoic in their dynamic, that they tend to be short-term focused in terms of time, and also specific result focused in terms of result. And thus, what passes for effective communication, or has passed for effective communication in the past, was generally not simultaneously educatory as conscious communication tends to be. It doesn't offer comprehensive context, as you folks have alluded to. And effective communication is, if it's operating unconsciously, it can't be optimally functional or arrive at optimal result other than accidentally occurring. So we just suggest that conscious communication is inherently effective. In the truest definition of the word effective, and that traditional tribal definitions of effective communication, which might mean if I communicate this way, I'll get my way, or I'll change someone's behavior, or I'll enforce my personal will or agenda or narrative or goals on them, and then they'll fall into line, and that's the definition of effective. Or I'll get the results I want egoically or taprootally to occur, or I'll get what I want socially, emotionally, financially, materially. If effective communication's baseline definition in the past has been, does it or does it not support taproot feeding on a consistent basis and keep us in a dynamic of unconsciousness, we would suggest that effective communication of the past is not truly effective. So bringing consciousness to communication brings effectiveness as long as it's grounded conscious communication. It's not superficial, it's not abstract, it's not spiritualized to the point of not meeting where the rubber meets the road in a human system or a social group. And it does address, the conscious communication does address the unconscious, tribalized, and egoic dynamics of human process from a conscious vantage point, and is thus conscious communication is inherently supportive of evolution, attainment of conscious understanding, discernment, and dissolution of the ego and the tribe, and is therefore very effective. And it can't be seen as effective by the tribe in any way as being other than seeing it as destructive, because conscious communication dissolves the tribe, it dissolves the ego. So we may not be able to get a tribe to acknowledge that conscious communication is effective, because the tribe can't understand what consciousness is to begin with, therefore it can't resonate with it. And conscious communication does not arrive from fear. And if the tribal process is driven in large part by the fuel of fear, leading to control and safety strategies and conspicuous consumption, competition, conflict, and an ego battle, then it just would not understand the effectiveness of conscious communication. So we hope that these reflections are supportive of your process. We understand that you're going into this new, so to speak. That said, you're arriving at the conversation with great depth, understanding, capacity, integrous intention, wisdom, and love. We absolutely applaud your efforts in this regard, and this conversation that you folks are producing is vital to the WSS vision and mission. So thank you. Forever thank you.